the middle of this stalemate, where pretty much nothing could happen, because both sides were completely at loggerheads. They couldn't get along over this unemployment tube problem. Up steps with the big moral sword our old friend Matti Vanhanen.
Vanhanen had them right where he wanted them. He contended there was no choice. Increasing taxes, he said, deepens the crisis, and any cuts in spending or services would hurt the already financially disadvantaged. So, increasing the minimum pension age to reflect the average European retirement age was the only option.
Then, rushing in to support these kinds of engineered conclusions were these international organizations who had every reason to want to get out of this crisis, like the Operation for Economic Cooperation and Development, which already has a vested interest in international trade. Of course they're going to tell people to go back to work. Bolstering business in a recession, that's their party line. So they naturally concurred that moving the retirement age up was good for everybody, and that it would definitely in the end increase wealth for pension earners, despite the fact that you have to take money away from the disabled and the unemployed in order to do it. That didn't seem to be a problem. In essence, this represents a kind of tacit agreement with the EK to quiet the voice of the SAK and the labor unions. Seen from the side of the labor unions is almost like a very thinly veiled threat, saying, you know what? You better stay healthy and you better stay employed, because if you lose your job and you need to claim unemployment, or you lose your health and you need to claim disability, good luck, sucker, because you ain't gonna get it. Those claims are gonna be hard to get. And now, if we look all the way back at 2005, it doesn't seem like we were so out of line when we were asking that question. To what extent did this pave the way, these reforms in 2005, to what extent did they pave the way for austerity? And to what extent did they pave the way for somebody's agenda? I want to take you back to 2005 so we can review 3 pieces of legislation that came out of that. And I think that you'll see that to a great extent, even in 2005, in the first wave of the reforms, a lot was being done to benefit the big business.
The first of the policy changes from 2005 was that instead of one's pension being determined by the last 10 years of one's working life, it was depending on the wage from one's entire life. This was a disadvantage to every employee. The second point was that inflation no longer was a part of the equation, meaning effectively that one's 2004 pension was now only worth 90%. Finally, 2005 saw the introduction of what's called a life expectancy coefficient. It's simple. It's a number based on how long they think you'll live, and the longer you live, the less you make.
You remember those decisions of 2007? They did benefit industry, and they also benefited the private pension companies, because particularly the two that said, first, that you can have extra available investment capital for you, and second, that said that you could hold on to high-risk stocks. Why? Well, because holding on to high-risk stocks is good. I mean, if you're in debt, you don't want to quit. You want to keep gambling. And so this is what the companies wanted to do, and they were glad that the government told them that they could, because it enabled them to keep their long-term goals. Still, though, it is odd that rather than continue the path to austerity, these companies seem to rather ask for an extension of the 2007 laws that basically gave them free rein to do whatever they want with whatever money they wanted, with very little laws constraining them. And from a policy standpoint, we must ask ourselves this: on what basis are they wanting to turn an emergency situation quick fix into permanent public policy? Mightn't this turn them into nothing more than for-profit ventures? And what then?
Antero Kiviniemi, director at the Insurance Department of Ministry of Social Affairs, repeats the 2007 dogma that if equity markets were again to start performing poorly, pension funds would most likely have to reduce their portfolio risk before the temporary rule ends this year. In practice, this would mean the sale of domestic equities, which would hurt the local economy in a much wider sense.
Matti Lepala, who is the investment director at Finnish Pension Alliance, goes even further than satisfaction that finally the companies are back on the right side of the ledger. No, he would like to make essentially no policy into permanent policy. And he's not alone.
We are looking at whether we could permanently use some of the buffers, like the money collected from employer and employees, and use those or part of them to take an investment risk. This is something we are lobbying for, because if we have money in a buffer that cannot be used to take investment risk, then we are not as effective as we could be.
Well, so he argues here for automatic triggers, which basically means you don't have to run down to Parliament and ask them to pass a law because you've already got it built into the economy. Whenever the economy does this, then we react this way. Furthermore, that bankers and lenders and investors, they can all decide on their best course of action, and they don't need to get together and consult with anybody. Oh no, it's every man for himself. It's easier that way. But what's really scary is who wants to go to, when you think about how much money they're in charge of, and who wants to be the first one to go down to pick up his pension check and find out that they've lost it all on the horses? And the risk is real, particularly in the long shadow of the Kiva affair. And the risk is that we're encouraging a move toward deregulation, a lack of public accountability, and irresponsible risk-taking. And even Kiva seems to have forgotten the lesson.
Director Timo Viherkäntä admits that the pension payouts are exceeding the contribution income, and foresees a day when we'll have to use not just the returns, but also the capital of the fund to pay out pensions. We will have to get rid of the idea of having a fixed long-term strategic allocation. We have to monitor the risks closely, but the aim with investments can't be a minimization of costs.
Now, this policy approach to me seems to put an undue amount of stress on the private pension company owners, especially the smaller ones. It's like we've finally gotten disaster out of the house, and not only are we leaving the door open for him, we're giving him a key in case he'd like to come back later. There's no austerity in sight. No, only agenda. And that's most troublesome. So the question kind of is any of this going to work? Some numbers point to yes. Like for instance, somebody who took a Finnish pension today would be making about as much as the average Finnish worker. This indicates a broad and strong standard, certainly broader and stronger than many of Finland's European peers. However, given the fact that of all of the pension money, only 1/4 of it is actually spent on saving for the future, the other 3/4 is spent today. That doesn't leave a lot in the bank. Additionally, because, as I said, of this aging workforce, pretty soon you're going to run into a lot of social costs that need to be paid. 11% of the GDP is currently spent on pensions alone, and within 20 years it will shoot up to 14. And who knows after that.
But what of the road ahead? We can be certain it will lengthen the working life of the Finns, thereby it succeeds by the Central Party's criteria. But as Alexei Kuusisto of the Labor Institute for Economic Research concludes, it means the rate of the older workers will continue to rise, thus contributing to the necessity for massive social program spending in the very near future.
This peculiar brand of austerity takes hold in Finland. It may have an unintended result, which is the death of the entire system. Because as Finns lose confidence in the Social Security, it may well be that they will start to look for their Social Security elsewhere, such as saving themselves, investing in private schemes, taking out personal policies or occupational policies. The mistrust that this would engender really speaks volumes to the failure, the consummate failure of current public policy on pension reform. Thank you.